So maybe someone's told you, just let go, or, oh, just let it be. And this is often not such an easy thing to do, right? But I heard about this equation, and I'll talk about it in this video, that suffering equals pain times resistance. And what that means is pain is inevitable in life, but suffering is optional. It's when we like resist it or hold on to things. We say like, why me? How could this happen? And we don't accept it and we struggle with it. All of that plus the pain is what leads to suffering. But if we're able to kind of let go of some of that and let that resistance go to zero, well, then what happened? So in this video, we're going to kind of talk about this with a story of how to let go. And it's a kind of an Eastern parable that talks about two arrows or two darts, and it presents you with a really powerful exercise for letting things go. So instead of suffering, you may want to try doing this. This video is about the role of suffering in our lives and how we may actually adopt a perspective that helps us to transcend or go beyond suffering. There's a Chinese story of a farmer and his son, and his son goes off to try to kind of find some food out in the forest, and he comes back with a brand new horse. And he says, I found this wild horse. And everyone says, oh, what great fortune. This is the best thing ever. You're so lucky. And the old farmer, who's kind of a wise, contemplative monk type, says, yeah, maybe so, maybe not. We'll see. And the next day, of course, the horse runs away. And everyone says, oh my gosh, what terrible luck. What misfortune. This is so bad. And the farmer says, maybe so, maybe not. We'll see. A few days later, the horse comes back, and he brought with him 3 or 4 wild mares that he had gone out and found and brought him back. And, oh my God, this is amazing. So lucky, so lucky. And you can imagine probably what the farmer said, maybe so, maybe not. We'll see. His son is trying to break some of those new wild mares and train them. He falls off and breaks his leg. What terrible luck, so much misfortune. Maybe so, maybe not. We'll see. And then a couple days later, the army, the national army, is collecting soldiers to go to some war off in the plains. And they come through town and they get all of the young, able-bodied men. But because the farmer's son is recovering from his broken leg, he's spared and he doesn't have to go off to war. What fortune. Maybe so, maybe not. And this speaks to, it's a more Eastern principle, but you see it coming up sometimes in Western philosophy and Western psychology, particularly in Stoicism. This idea of equanimity. Is there a place beyond good and evil, beyond right and wrong, between or beyond good and bad, beyond maybe desire for things and aversion or fear of things that we don't want? Yuval Harari, the sociologist or anthropologist, who talks about this in one of his books as an analogy is you can imagine someone who's on the beach and the waves are coming in, crashing on the shore, and he spends all his time trying to run after and grab the good waves and avoid the bad ones. And so he's just in that kind of tidal area, running away and grabbing on and desire and fear and good and bad, or I want this, I don't want that, and it gets kind of exhausting, right? What if you were to just to step back and kind of sit on the beach? And this is, again, really kind of an Eastern perspective on what we may think of as enlightenment, but really, again, it's kind of this equanimity or transcendence, right? It's not that we don't have goals or desires or certain things we want or don't want. We're still actively engaged in the world. But maybe you can do that from a deeper perspective, right? From a place of stillness, right? Beyond good or bad or right and wrong or this or that or self and other. Is there some still point that's kind of beyond? It's called non-duality, right? That duality of this or that, or it was good or it was bad. Just living in a way where maybe instead of, clinging after each of those waves and getting swept away and chasing after, right? You're sort of, again, learning how to surf, okay? And so it's not that we don't want things a certain way and don't take control of or manage our lives, but when the inevitable suffering occurs or things go wrong, can we be with that more transcendent perspective? I heard this summarized as an equation once, and we'll go towards how this relates to suffering.
And it said something like this: pain times resistance equals suffering. One more time: pain times resistance equals suffering. And so for you math people, what happens if you let resistance go to zero? It speaks to the fact that we're going to have pain in our lives. We're going to have loss. We're going to have change. The only thing that's true and constant in this experience is that everything's changing all the time. Everything is impermanent. The problem is when we resist that and we cling and we attach and we struggle, that's where suffering comes in. And there's a really profound but important teaching on just that point, okay? And it's called the two arrows. So you can imagine I'm walking through downtown Pittsburgh. That's about 30 minutes from where I live, and I get shot with an arrow right in the shoulder. It just grazes me right by the side. I'm bleeding a little bit. Oh my goodness! Who did that? What planet are we living in that I'm just walking through downtown Pittsburgh and an arrow gets shot and grazes my shoulder and cuts me open? Right, so I go to the hospital, they patch me up, and my shoulder's gonna be okay. But it's like, dude, like, I'm never going to Pittsburgh again. And I have to call the Pittsburgh police, and I'm like, dude, you need to find this guy. What the heck are you guys doing? Like, are you that incompetent that you can't figure this out? And then I say, you know what? I love my hometown. All my friends are here, family close by, like my community's here. But dude, I can't stand this place. Like, I'm moving out across. I'm going to California. I got to get as far away as I can from this. And, this whole happiness PhD project I'm doing and teaching courses and writing and working with the military and businesses to create organizational well-being, I don't have time for that anymore because I literally just need to study full time, figuring out who shot me with this arrow so I can get revenge. And every day I obsess over that. My relationships fall off. I don't go to the gym. I don't do anything because I'm just obsessed with revenge. I have to figure out who did this. So question in this hypothetical, hope that was clear. How much of that suffering was necessary and how much of it was optional? Well, it probably hurt. I have never been shot with an arrow, thank goodness, but I've had a few pretty serious injuries in my life, and there's some inevitable pain there that is part of our experience of life, isn't there? But everything beyond that, why me? Why is this so unfair? This righteous indignation, this holding on to resentment and anger and frustration, and I have to figure it out, and I have to get back at this person, and I have to set things straight and make it right, and me, why did this happen? And all of that, which can, by the way, totally derail an entire life or an entire relationship or an entire career. All of that was optional. And so it's the second arrow because imagine I just got shot right there, and then literally right after I got shot with a second arrow right in the same spot. How bad would that be? The worst pain imaginable. And yet, so often we do this to ourselves, don't we? That's the second arrow. I've been through, again, in my own personal life, someone that I was totally in love with broke my heart. A lot of pain there, right? First arrow. But the second arrow of why? I need to understand why this happened, and I need to figure it out, and is there a way that I could get even with her? Or I'm never going to be in a relationship again, or I have to change, I need to be more successful because I wasn't good enough, or all of these games that our psychology plays with us. All of that was a second arrow right in the same spot. And even like maybe a physical injury, right? Like I took a softball right between the eyes a few years ago, broke my nose, I had to get surgery. And thankfully at that point in my life, I was a little bit more wise. Okay, still very not, but a little bit more than I had been. But still, there's like, dude, this is crazy luck. Like, this is literally like winning the lottery, except instead of money, I won a baseball right between the eyes. Like, how did this happen? And like, their shortstop is such an idiot. He can't even throw the ball to his own fielder. Like, okay, again, all of that, second arrow right in the same spot. Resentment, guilt, frustration, the why me, the I need to get even, I need to figure out how this happened to me. All of that. Second arrow. The core teaching here, again, is this sort of transcendent perspective on life. Again, not that you're not engaged, and not that you're not, taking control and owning your life, but can we view things with a bit of distance or maybe a bit of equanimity? Acknowledging that from the perspective of the entire universe, these concepts of good and bad and right and wrong, or left and right, conservative, Republican, you know, even these concepts sometimes of like good and evil or self and other. You zoom out on that perspective and you look at this little blue-green dot floating like a little, Carl Sagan talks about a little particle of dust in a sunbeam. All of a sudden, that's a bit of a different way of viewing these sort of ups and downs of life, right? Sort of like our very wise Chinese farmer. And then the invitation with the teaching of the two arrows, remember? Pain times resistance equals suffering. So can you face the difficulties of your life, the storms of your life, with a little bit of that perspective of rather being, you know, in these 10-foot waves getting thrown around and fighting for your life and hanging on, trying to float? Right? You can imagine kind of sitting on a surfboard, right? Just kind of riding those waves. And doing some reflection for yourself right now, okay, as we close out this video. Are there any second arrows in your life? In your upbringing? In your childhood? In your relationships? In your career? With your friends? With yourself? Is there any guilt or resentment or why me or revenge or figuring it out? Any of those second arrows that you're still maybe holding on to or getting shot with? And importantly, okay, final thought here is if there was a lesson in your suffering or in this experience, totally fine to hold on to that, right? But it's just all of this extra stuff, that second arrow, an invitation there to investigate that and just ask the question, what could I let go of? What could I go beyond? And a final invitation, if you want to do this, is sometimes can be helpful, is if you can think about what that second arrow is for you, maybe there's several, you can just writing that down on a piece of paper or something little like this, okay? And you can just maybe fold that in half or fold that up and just reflect and maybe make a commitment. What would it mean to let this go? If you were to really let that go, that second arrow, what would that do for you now? Are you really ready to start to let that go? Remember, pain times resistance equals suffering. What would that do for your suffering? And we do this in our retreats. Maybe light this on fire, kind of symbolically, set it outside or bury it, or you could just even acknowledge it and throw it away. And it's pretty symbolic, right? But again, it's trying to adopt this psychological posture of equanimity, peace, and learning how to, at times in our lives, transcend or go beyond suffering.